Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg and I'm here today to do my book haul for the month of June. I'm going to show you all of the books that I have brought into my library this month, and I'm, of course, as with any book haul, I'm excited about all of them. There are a fair amount. So we're going to start with some books that were sent to me by publishers. Then we're going to talk about some books that were given to me for my birthday, and then we'll talk about books that I purchased for myself this month. That's the order we're going to go in. And I'm filming this a little bit earlier than usual. Not a big deal, but by the end of the month, Joel and I will be on a trip to visit my family, which will be a lot of fun, but it doesn't mean I'll be able to film a lot. So I'm filming this a week before the actual end of June, and it's going to be fine. Anything that I purchase in that last week of June, if I purchase anything in that last week of June, will be rolled over into my July book haul. Just wanted to give you a heads up that I'm filming this a little bit early. It is what it is. I also want to mention before we dive in and talk about the exciting books, the first of which has a fun little add-on bonus to it, that there will be affiliate links to all of these books to bookshop.org in the description box. If you want more information about the books, or if you want to purchase based on what I have to say about them, or if I spark your interest, you can use those links and it would help me out a tiny little bit. Otherwise, you can support your local independent bookstore. I'm wearing a t-shirt today from Book People of Moscow, a very fun store. You could also support your local library. And if they don't have the book, or if they're not going to be getting in the book that you are interested in, you can request that they get themselves a copy, which they can then loan to you. Supporting your libraries is always a good thing to do, and supporting independent bookstores is always a good thing to do. Without further ado, let's jump in. So as I said, we're going to start with books that were sent to me by publishers, and we have 3 of those to get through before we get to my birthday gifts. So, first, a surprising gift from FSG. They wanted to send me a copy of the Mobius book by Catherine Lacey. And this is a really fun marketing push because they sent me a copy of the book and they sent me a t-shirt that ties into the book. You can see fiction and nonfiction are on where a breast pocket would be. And one of them is upside down, the other is not. That's going to be very important in a moment. And on the back of the shirt is the image of the Mobius strip that is on both covers of the book. Yes, both covers of the book. So what a fun little bonus. I have a bookish t-shirt from FSG and I'm really loving that. So why is it important that one side is upside down? Yeah, look at that. So when you open the book from this side, you can read it until you get about halfway through, and then you can flip it over to the other side and read that side. It's reversible. And I believe when you flip it over, there's a section that's a little more memoir-ish. Let's just read the description of this. Adrift after a sudden breakup and its ensuing depression, the novelist Catherine Lacey began cataloging the wreckage of her life and the beauty of her friendships, a practice that eventually propagated fiction both entirely imagined and painfully true. Betrayed by the mercurial partner she had trusted with shared mortgage and suddenly catapulted into the unknown, Lacey's appetite vanished, a visceral reminder of the teenage emaciation that came when she stopped believing in God. But through relationships, travel, reading, and memories of her religious fanaticism, she charts the contours of faith's absence and reemergence. She and her characters recall Gnostic experiences with animals, close encounters with male anger, grief-driven lust, and the redemptive power of platonic love and of narrative itself. The result is a book of uncommon vulnerability and wisdom, and a heartbreaking and heart-mending exploration of endings and beginnings. A hybrid work with no beginning or ending, readable from either side, the Mobius book troubles the line between memory and fiction with an open-hearted defense of faith's power and inherent danger. Now, the only book of Catherine Lacey's that I have attempted to read before was Biography of X, and I did not finish that book. But she is an incredibly skilled writer, so I would be curious to try her work again, maybe dip a toe in. And this seems like it could be very tricky, but it also seems like it could be very interesting. And the book has a very soft cover. Now, I feel like I'm getting on a high horse lately because I feel like I am really interested in books that do something interesting with the actual cover of the book and don't have a dust cover. Like, do interesting things with the book, and you don't actually need a dust jacket at all. And this is a great example of that. A Bookshop of One's Own by Jane Chalmley, another really great example. So I would love to see more of this, please, publishers. Also, it's got a very soft, I don't know if you can hear the texture. This is like book ASMR. It's very soft and fun textured. So, also, it has 2 different opening sentences, because in all of my book hauls, I like to read a little bit from the opening. So we're going to do both this time. And the dedications are different on both sides. So on this side that I randomly opened to, it's Para los dos Brendas. And then it begins, odd impulse to catalog these days. Not that I can forget them. Not that I can remember them clearly. I woke in the guest room, the attic, a guest in my own home. I'd never slept a night in that room, and staring up at the white clapboard ceilings and walls, I felt I'd been shrunk down and shoved into a doll's house, and I knew then, again, or for the first time, how grief expands as it constricts, how it turns a person into a toy version of herself. And then if you go to the other side and flip it over, there is a dedication for Sean, Sarah, and Wilhelmina, and it begins, Edie's on the line, says she's coming over, says it's urgent, no context. Of course, Marie says, but where are you now? Where have you been? Dial tone. Marie returns the receiver to its cradle, turns off the ringer for the night. A landline. How quaint. When she goes out, nobody can reach her. That is both of the beginnings of the Mobius book by Catherine Lacey and a really fun t-shirt bonus from FSG. That book is available now. It came out earlier in the week in which I'm filming this video. And of the 3 books that were sent to me by publishers, only one of them has not been released yet. Winging It With You from Putnam was a fun surprise that came in the mail earlier this week. This is by Chip Pons, and it was released in June. So this is another book that is already out there in the world. Now, I was totally unfamiliar with Chip Pons. He is an Instagrammer. He's Books Over Bros on Instagram. So Winging It With You is obviously a gay rom-com, and if you know me, you know I am very into that. So this was a nice, fun surprise, and it has a pretty cover as well. Asher Bennett thought his relationship was just fine until he unceremoniously dumped at the Boston airport ahead of the Epic Trek, a worldwide travel competition reality show. Armed with only a ticket and righteous indignation, Asher finds solace at an airport TGI Fridays. Luckily, right in front of him is a smooth-talking airline pilot ready for takeoff. Theo Fernandez has been grounded. He's the only pilot who has never taken a vacation, and the edict has been passed down. Prove you're prioritizing work-life balance or say goodbye to your wings. Struggling to bask in his new downtime, he stumbles upon the perfect opportunity. The handsome guy at his favorite terminal eatery has a sudden opening for a partner on a nationally televised reality show. As Theo and Asher buckle up to fake date for the cameras, the undercurrents of attraction make them wonder if their on-screen chemistry hints at something bigger. But do they have the courage to leave their baggage behind for another chance at love? I love a pun, and that was a pun right there at the end. So again, thank you to Putnam. This feels delightful. I don't know that I will manage to read it in June when I'm doing my Pride reading because the month's almost over, but definitely something that I would like to hold on to. Fun summer romance reading. I'm in for it. Here is how the book opens. Chapter 1, Asher. Boston Logal International Airport, Terminal E, Boston, Massachusetts. I'm sorry, Asher, but I can't go on this trip. The last words I expected to hear coming out of my long-term boyfriend's mouth at an airline ticket counter. After months of meticulous planning, countless hours of my life I will never get back, painstakingly stressing over the cost analysis documents and packing lists and risk waivers, this was the one travel hiccup I could not have thought to plan for. That is the opening of Winging It With You by Chip Pons. The final book that I got from a publisher came as a surprise. I hadn't even heard of this before, just like Winging It With You. And this came from Hogarth. It's We Loved to Run by Stephanie Reintz. And this doesn't come out until August 26th. So if you use the link below, it's a pre-order. If you contact your local independent bookstore, it's a pre-order. If you request that your library get a copy, you won't have it until the end of September. This sounds really interesting to me. Again, I was really unfamiliar with it, but from the description, it sounds like a running version of Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, which was a bit of a cilantro book last year, but it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. It was, I believe, a finalist for the Booker Prize as well. And for all the reasons I was drawn to that book, I do feel drawn to this one as well. Here is the description of it. We loved running because it was who we were, who we'd been in high school, who we hoped to be in futures we couldn't yet imagine. Strong and fast, fast and strong. At Frost, a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, the runners on the women's cross-country team have their sights set on the 1992 New England Division III championships and will push themselves through every punishing workout and skipped meal to achieve their goal. But Kristen, the team's star, is hiding a secret about what happened over the summer, and her unpredictable behavior jeopardizes the girls' chance to win. Team captain Danielle is convinced she can restore Kristen's confidence, even if it means burying her own past. As the final meet approaches, Kristen, Danielle, and the rest of the girls must transcend their individual circumstances and run the race as a team. Told from the perspectives of the 6 fastest team members, We Loved to Run deftly illuminates the impossible standards young women set for themselves in spite of their own powerlessness. With startling honesty and boundless empathy, Stephanie Rienz reveals how girls, even those in competition, find ways to love and defend one another. I mean, doesn't that sound really interesting? Also sounds like a great summer read, which is a bit of a shame that it's coming out so late in the summer, but it just, to me, that sounds really interesting. And, strong female stories are something I'm always interested in. Part 1, Like a Thistle in a Sock. Chapter 1, Warm Up. We hated a lot of things. A gradual hill in the second mile of a cross-country race. 2 hard workouts in a row. The little packets of Lorna Doones in our brown bag lunches that assistant coach picked up from the college cafeteria, like vanilla chalk. Big toenails, ignore my calendar, big toenails that were a tad too long. When our coach said, here's where you make your move. Inner thigh friction, holes in our socks, our mothers, shouldn't you take off 1 day a week? That is the opening of We Loved to Run by Stephanie Rienz, coming from Hogarth, August 26th. Let's get into books that were given to me for my birthday. So I obviously have a birthday in the month of June. 2 of these books were given to me by my husband, Joel, because he's the best. And then 2 of them were given by friends. So starting with the ones that Joel gave me. Now, I already own a copy of The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, but this is a first commercial edition of the book, which is pretty cool. So when you open it to the copyright page, it says that this is one of those circumstances where the Franklin Library purchased the rights to do an actual first edition of The Things They Carried. It's something that they also did with Rabbit at Rest by John Updike and a couple of other books from that era. In fact, The Things They Carried lost the Pulitzer Prize for fiction to Rabbit at Rest. And I haven't read Rabbit at Rest yet. I've only read the first book in that series, but I hated it. So I cannot fathom how this book lost, except that people really were excited about everything John Updike did for a very long time. Anyway, I love this book. I think it's great. It is difficult. It is a collection of linked stories about soldiers in the Vietnam War. It is difficult. It is painful. It is beautiful. So it is one of my favorite books, and it showed up at my local used bookstore, and I was telling Joel I didn't want to spend the money to get it, so he got it for me. There's Tim O'Brien. So what a delight to have in my library. And since I already have a copy of this in the library, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but what a great gift. And I already told you what it's about, but in the spirit of how I run my book hauls, let's also read a little bit from the opening. The first story in this collection is called The Things They Carried. What do you know? We have a title. First Lieutenant Jimmy Cross carried letters from a girl named Martha, a junior at Mount Sebastian College in New Jersey. They were not love letters, but Lieutenant Cross was hoping, so he kept them folded in plastic at the bottom of his rucksack. In the late afternoon, after a day's march, he would dig his foxhole, wash his hands under a canteen, unwrap the letters, hold them with the tips of his fingers, and spend the last hour of light pretending. Let's stop there. Such a good book. The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien. The other book that Joel got for me was another thing I didn't want to spend the money on for myself, so he kindly did. So if you know me, you know I'm obsessed with the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, and The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder is a book that there are no shortage of beautiful editions of. However, I saw this at my local used bookstore and really felt it doesn't look like much from the insert, but once you take it out, this is incredible. So this book is about people who are crossing a rope bridge in Peru in, I want to say the 1700s. It could be the 1800s, but the rope bridge collapses and they all fall to their deaths. And a religious man begins to investigate. He is curious, so he kind of wants to know, was this divine punishment because they were bad people? Or, and the or is sort of mercurial. Does it mean that there's no design at all and things happen at random? Or does it potentially indicate that there is no divine plan at all? So in his investigation, he talks to people who knew all of the people, and you can see the people who fall from the bridge on the cover. And it's a cloth-bound book, and they have wrapped this gray cloth over the blue so you can actually feel where the one starts. There are really stunning illustrations in this as well. This is a Heritage Club edition of the book. I might have to look for more Heritage Club books to see what else is out there, because if this one is any indication, look at this illustration. Again, you have the sort of religious man and then the rope bridge with the people on it, luggage, and there are more gorgeous illustrations from Jean Charlo throughout the book. I will find another one for you. I love them so much. And again, in the spirit of doing this like a traditional book haul, even though I already own a copy of this book, let's do the opening of this book. I'm flipping past the introduction. Part 1, Perhaps an Accident. On Friday noon, July the 20th, 1714, the finest bridge in all Peru broke and precipitated 5 travelers into the gulf below. This bridge was on the high road between Lima and Cusco, and hundreds of persons passed over it every day. It had been woven of osier by the Incas more than a century before, and visitors to the city were always let out to see it. It was a mere ladder of thin slats swung out over the gorge, with handrails of dried vine. Horses and coaches and chairs had to go down hundreds of feet below and pass over the narrow torrent on rafts, but no one, not even the viceroy, not even the Archbishop of Lima, had descended with the baggage rather than cross by the famous bridge of San Luis Rey. Beautiful gift from Joel. He did a good job. He did a very good job. All right. And then 2 friends also gave me some birthday presents. First is a book with a horrifying sounding title, but we're going to go with it. It's called Blind Your Ponies by Stanley Gordon West. This is a very popular Montana book, and it had been recommended to me by the person who ended up giving it to me back in February, and I got on a hold list for the audio at that time, and I am still on a hold list for the audio. In fact, because I forgot to cancel it. So yeah, there's a months-long wait on Libby for the audio of this book, and it is a long book, so I think the audio is like 22 hours. But they really sold me on reading this book, so I can't wait. This edition is published by Algonquin. Here is the description of it. Hope is hard to come by in the hard-luck town of Willow Creek. Sam Pickett and 5 young men are about to change that. Sam Pickett never expected to settle in this dried-up shell of a town on the western edge of the world. He's come here to hide from the violence and madness that have shattered his life, but what he finds is what he least expects. There's a spirit that endures in Willow Creek, Montana. It seems that every inhabitant of this forgotten outpost has a story, a reason for taking a detour to this place, or a reason for staying. As the coach of the hapless high school basketball team, 0 wins, 93 losses, Sam can't help but be moved by the bravery he witnesses in the everyday lives of people, including his own young players, bearing their sorrows and broken dreams. How do they carry on, believing in a future that seems to be based on the flimsiest of promises? Drawing on the strength of the boys on the team, sharing the hope they display despite insurmountable odds, Sam finally begins to see a future worth living. Author Stanley Gordon West has filled the town of Willow Creek with characters so vividly cast that they become as real as relatives, and their stories, so full of humor and passion, loss and determination, illuminate a path into the human heart. I mean, it sounds really good. So, Book 1, Chapter 1. Looking back, Sam Pickett knew the trouble began that day at the state fair, when the madness winked at him. Even as a 10-year-old, he had a sneaking suspicion that somewhere in that shrouded realm where fates are sealed, his life had been irrevocably jinxed. Let's stop there. That is Blind Your Ponies by Stanley Gordon West. Really looking forward to reading this. And my neighbor, also a very good friend of ours, gave me The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down, a Hmong Child, Her American Doctors, and the Collision of Two Cultures. This is by Anne Fadiman. And I have known about this book pretty much since it was published, because my older sister read this book when she was in college. She was pre-med, and she took a medical ethics class. And this book was not very old at that time, and they read this book, and I asked my sister about it, and she said that it's a fascinating book, and she had enjoyed it. So it's many years late and not something I would have chosen for myself, and yet it sounds really perfect. And one of the reasons my friend and neighbor wanted to get this is that there is a settlement of Hmong people in the town where I live. If you go to a farmer's market, a lot of the vendors are Hmong people. So, interesting connection to where I live. So here's what this book is about. The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down refers to epilepsy in a child, just to explain the title. The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down explores the clash between a small county hospital in California and a refugee family from Laos over the care of Leah Lee, a Hmong child diagnosed with severe epilepsy. Leah's parents and her doctors both wanted what was best for Leah, but the lack of understanding between them led to tragedy. Winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award for Nonfiction, the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Current Interest, and the Salon Book Award, Anne Fadiman's compassionate account of this cultural impasse is literary journalism at its finest. Sounds really fascinating. So let's do a little bit from the opening. We're going to skip past the preface. Okay, Chapter 1, Birth. If Leah Lee had been born in the highlands of northwest Laos, where her parents and 12 of her brothers and sisters were born, her mother would have squatted on the floor of the house that her father had built from axe-hewn planks thatched with bamboo and grass. The floor was dirt, but it was clean. Her mother, Fua, sprinkled it regularly with water to keep the dust down and swept it every morning and evening with a broom she had made of grass and bark. She used a bamboo dustpan, which she had also made herself, to collect the feces of the children who were too young to defecate outside, and emptied its contents in the forest. Even if Fua had been a less fastidious housekeeper, her newborn babies wouldn't have gotten dirty, since she never let them actually touch the floor. She remains proud to this day that she delivered each of them into her own hands, reaching between her legs to ease out the head and then letting the rest of the body slip out onto her bent forearms. That's the beginning of The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. Now, the birthday madness doesn't quite stop there, because in the month of June, a couple of people gifted me gift cards, which was very thoughtful. The first was Stacy Payne, who sent me a gift card for Pride with Montana Book Company, and they mailed it to me. And I immediately spent some of that. And then when I went to Montana Book Company, I found a gift card from Danny Martin, who is That Bookish Bear on Instagram, as a birthday present. And I got a birthday present gift card from Marsha Johansson as well. So I got a lot of books, and that was a lot of fun, because this year there hasn't been a lot of expendable cash to spend in bookstores. So I've been relying on publishers a lot more to try to get stuff in. And I've been trading in used books at my local used bookstore as well, because that's sort of a continuous trade back and forth. Doesn't necessarily involve money. So with the gift card that was given to me by Danny Martin, I figured the only appropriate thing to do would be to buy The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong, because this is his favorite book that he has read so far in 2025. And it just felt appropriate. And like, this is probably a good way of honoring him and getting a book that I had already wanted to read. I was a little more mixed on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which was Ocean Vuong's previous novel, than a lot of people. I think it may have been a bit overhyped for me, and that probably hurt the experience a bit. But I had been hesitant about this one until when its release came up. I started seeing a lot of really good reviews, hearing good things from readers who have immediately jumped on this and read it and loved it, and seen interviews or clips of interviews with Ocean Vuong that are so thoughtful and sweet that I have been completely swayed into wanting to read this book. Here is what it is about. And by the way, it has also been blessed by Oprah. One late summer evening in the post-industrial town of East Gladness, Connecticut, 19-year-old Hai stands on the edge of a bridge in pelting rain, ready to jump, when he hears someone shout across the river. The voice belongs to Grazina, an elderly widow succumbing to dementia, who convinces him to take another path. Bereft and out of options, he quickly becomes her caretaker. Over the course of the year, the unlikely pair develops a life-altering bond, one built on empathy, spiritual reckoning, and heartbreak, with the power to transform Hai's relationship to himself, his family, and a community on the brink. Which sounds really good. This is published by Penguin Press, by the way, and here is how it opens. The hardest thing in the world is to live only once. But it's beautiful here, even the ghosts agree. Mornings, when the light rinses this place the shade of oatmeal, they rise as mist over the rye across the tracks and stumble toward the black-spired pines, searching for their names that no longer live in any living thing's mouth. Let's stop there. That is the opening of The Emperor of Gladness, Ocean Vuong's new book, which I will hopefully be reading before the end of 2025. And with the gift card that Stacey Payne sent to me, I got two books. The first was Nesting by Rasheen O'Donnell. This had been on the long list for the Women's Prize for fiction and did not make it onto the shortlist. And it feels like every year there's one book people sort of coalesce around to say, this really should have been on the shortlist and potentially should have even won. That's how I discovered Cecily Pinn's Wandering Souls, a book that was one of my favorite reads the year in which I read that. So hopefully this history will repeat with Nesting by Rasheen O'Donnell, which sounds like a bit of a difficult read, but like it will be really good. On a bright spring afternoon, Sierra Faye makes a split-second decision that will change everything. Grabbing an armful of clothes off the clothesline, she straps her two young daughters into her car and drives away. Head spinning, all she knows for certain is that home is no longer safe, and that this time, when she leaves, she must stay away. On the surface, she has a perfect life. Her sometimes kind and attentive husband, Ryan, is a good provider from a nice family, and they have another baby on the way. But he also monitors Sierra's every move and flies into unpredictable rages in which he convinces her she can do nothing right and he has isolated her from work, friends, and her beloved family. Was fleeing the right thing to do? With no job and no support, Sierra struggles to provide a sense of normalcy for her little girls. Facing a broken housing system, they move into a hotel room on a floor reserved for women like her, eating takeout, washing their clothes in the bathroom sink, and building a community with the other residents. Ryan, meanwhile, wages a relentless campaign to win her back, and Sierra wavers. He never hit her, after all. And don't the girls need a stable home and their father? Oh, it sounds like it could be a really difficult read, but it also, I've heard so many good things about it, and it sounds like a very urgent story. This is also published by Algonquin, and here is how it begins. Part 1, Before Thunder, Spring 2018. Chapter 1. Sierra steps out of the car and a cold sea wind catches her breath, whipping her hair across her face. After some maneuvering, ignoring Tuts from the passenger's seat, she's managed to squeeze her old silver Micra into a tight parking spot across the road from Scary's Beach. The April afternoon sky stretches bright and clear. Above the rooftops of the seafront terraces, gulls glide as if manipulated by invisible wires, their taut wings motionless. The passenger door slams. That's the beginning of Nesting by Rasheen O'Donnell. The other book I got with the gift card from Stacey Payne was The Disappeared by Andrew Porter. I loved Andrew Porter's newest book, The Imagined Life, so much that I want to read more books by him. In my mid-year book freakout tag, I called him my favorite new author because I cannot wait to explore more. So the one that I selected to do next is The Disappeared. This is a short story collection. I know not everybody's into short stories. I am. And I can't wait to see where he takes me on this journey. Beautiful cover, by the way, and also book ASMR, fun texture. A husband and wife hear a mysterious bump in the night. A father mourns the closeness he has lost with his son. A friendship with a married couple turns into a dangerous codependency. With gorgeous sensitivity, assurance, and a propulsive sense of menace, these stories center on disappearances both literal and figurative. Lives and loves that are cut short, the vanishing of one's youthful self. From San Antonio to Austin, from the clamor of a crowded restaurant to the cigarette at a lonely kitchen table, Andrew Porter captures each of these relationships mid-flight. Every individual life punctuated by loss and beauty and need. The Disappeared reaffirms the undeniable artistry of a contemporary master of the form. I can't wait to read this book. This is published by Vintage, and let's do a little bit from the opening story, which is The Disappeared. Oh, sorry. Austin is the name of the first story. The other night at a party in Westlake Hills, just outside of Austin, I stepped outside to get some air and found a group of my old friends sitting around a fire pit in the backyard, smoking cigarettes. It was a strange sight, not only because I hadn't seen most of these people in several years, but also because they were all still smoking, almost as if they had been frozen there in time, while I had been off somewhere else, getting married and having children and getting older. It was close to 1 o'clock in the morning by then, and my wife, Laura, had long since left the party. The air that night was brisk, and everyone was huddled around the fire, hugging their knees, holding their windbreakers close to their chests. That is the opening of the first story of The Disappeared by Andrew Porter. And with the gift card from Marsha Johansson, I have a book on order, so that will end up in July, but I also got myself a copy of I Remember Lights by Ben Ladouceur. This had been mentioned to me by a subscriber, and I apologize, I don't remember who. And as soon as they mentioned it, I looked it up and thought, I would love to get a copy of that book. So as soon as I had a gift card, this is what came. The first novel from award-winning poet Ben Ladouceur, I Remember Lights, depicts a time when the world promised everything to everyone, however irresponsibly. In summer 1967, love is all you need, but some forms of love are criminal. As the spectacular Expo 67 celebrations take shape, a young man new to Montreal learns about gay life from cruising, partners, one-night stands, live-in lovers, and friends. Once Expo begins, he finds romance with a charismatic visitor, but their time is limited. When the fireworks wither into smoke, so do their options. A decade later, during the notorious 1977 police raid on a gay bar called Trucks, he comes to understand even more about the bitter choice so often made by men like him between happiness and safety. I Remember Lights is a vital reminder of forgotten history and a visceral exploration of the details of queer life, tribulation and joy, exile and solidarity, cruelty and fortitude. This is from an independent books publisher called Book Hug Press. There is their logo right there. So there's no audio of this book. And so the book is really the only way, because it is an independent publisher. My library didn't make a purchase for a copy. So really special order was the only way that I was going to get a copy. So I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. And I can't wait to read this book. Here, pretty end papers as well. Here is how I Remember Lights begins. I headed to the bathhouse nearest to my home, hoping to find some good company. In case I couldn't, I brought a book, though once I took my place in the empty sauna, it sat unopened in my lap. I leaned back and felt sweat develop on my forehead. It was late in the autumn, which in Montreal meant that the air outside was always cold, even on days of bright sun. The heat of the sauna was novel and welcome. That's I Remember Lights by Ben Ladouceur. I also reread Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan recently after seeing the film adaptation, so I decided I really wanted to get copies of the books of hers that I haven't read. And so here is Walk the Blue Fields, a story collection by her. This turned up at my local used bookstore, so I got this with credit from them. Walk the Blue Fields is an unforgettable array of quietly wrenching stories about despair and desire in the timeless world of modern-day Ireland. In The Long and Painful Death, a writer awarded a stay to work in Henrik Bull's old cottage has her peace interrupted by an unwelcome intruder, whose ulterior motives only emerge as the night progresses. That, I believe, is a story that was collected in So Late in the Day, which has, I believe, 3 short stories collected from her previous works and 1 new one. In the title story, a priest waits at the altar to perform a marriage, and during the ceremony and the festivities that follow, battles his memories of a love affair with the bride that led him to question all to which he has dedicated his life. I would follow Claire Keegan pretty much anywhere. So, the first one is The Parting Gift. When sunlight reaches the foot of the dressing table, you get up and look through the suitcase again. It's hot in New York, but it may turn cold in winter. All morning, the bantam cocks have crowed. It's not something you will miss. You must dress and wash, polish your shoes. Outside, dew lies on the fields, white and blank as pages. Soon the sun will burn it off. It's a fine day for the hay. That's the opening story of Walk the Blue Fields by Claire Keegan. This edition is published by Black Cat. If you know me, you also know that I'm really obsessed with the Academy Awards, in addition to the Pulitzer Prize and books and other things. So when I saw a copy of Gentleman's Agreement by Laura Hobson at my local used bookstore, I couldn't pass it up. So Gentleman's Agreement won Best Picture for 1947. It stars Gregory Peck as a journalist who goes undercover. Basically, he decides that he is going to tell people that he's Jewish and see how, or if, because he's skeptical in the beginning. He doesn't think it's going to make a difference. But as soon as he starts telling people that he's Jewish, he starts experiencing microaggressions and then aggressions, and things keep steadily getting worse. So it is a sort of examination of subtle racism in the United States and the people who allow it to continue as well. So it isn't just about racism, it's also about complicity. And the movie, I think, is only okay. I would be very curious to read the book and see how that compares. So here is how this book opens. Chapter 1. Abrupt as anger, depression plunged through him. It was one hell of an assignment. "You'll find some angle," John Minifee said. "It'll need an angle, all right." He squinted his eyes and looked off past Minifee's shoulder as if he were taking the measure of some palpable thing there. Let's stop there. That is Gentleman's Agreement, and this is published by Cherokee, and yeah, it'll be very interesting to get around to that. The final book that I brought into my library in June of 2025, basically I got a credit for a book that was under $5 on Thrift Books. I have not really shopped from Thrift Books very much at all because there is a tendency to get an edition of a book that you did not want. Like, I've ordered hardcovers and gotten paperbacks. I have ordered paperbacks and a library edition showed up that was not indicated it was a library edition. So to me, I just decided that it was not worth the unpredictability of whether or not you're going to get what you want. But they gave me a birthday credit for the month of June. And one of the first things I thought is, I wonder if there's an Edna Ferber book I don't own. Found one. Roast Beef Medium, The Business Adventures of Emma McChesney. Edna Ferber won a Pulitzer Prize for So Big, and in my opinion, should have won the first ever Pulitzer Prize for her novel Fanny Herself. So far, I have only read Fanny Herself. That is the only novel by Edna Ferber I have read, but I loved it so much that I have been collecting like all of her books that I can find. Witty, sharp, and confident, Emma McChesney is a fierce heroine. Following her bitter divorce, she sets out against all odds as a traveling saleswoman so she can support herself and her son. Roast Beef Medium, The Business Adventures of Emma McChesney, is the first book in Edna Ferber's trilogy. It's 1911, and our 36-year-old heroine has just struggled through an awful divorce. Now alone with her 17-year-old son, Jock, Emma McChesney becomes the only traveling saleswoman for a New York skirts and petticoats company, T.A. Buck's Featherbloom Petticoats. Her life suddenly revolves around train journeys and dirty hotel stays. She must ward off her male colleagues' unwanted advances while they persistently tell her that her career isn't suitable for a woman. Strong-willed and sharp-tongued, Emma McChesney represents many hardworking single mothers in early 20th century America. I fully trust Edna Ferber to tell these stories. Here is how the first one opens. 1. Roast Beef Medium. There is a journey compared to which the travels of Bunyan's hero were a summer evening's stroll. The pilgrims by whom this forced march is taken belong to a maligned fraternity and are known as traveling men. sample case in hand, trunk key in pocket, cigar in mouth, brown derby a tilt at an angle of 90, each young and untried traveler starts on his journey down that road which leads through morasses of chicken a la Creole, over greasy mountains of queen fritters, made doubly perilous by slippery glaciers of rum sauce, into formidable jungles of breaded veal chops, threaded by sanguine and deadly streams of tomato gravy, past sluggish mires of dreadful things and casserole, over hills of corned beef hash, across shaking quagmires of veal glacé, plunging into sloughs of slaw, until haggard, weary, digestion shattered, complexion gone, he reaches the safe haven of roast beef medium. Once there, he never again strays. Although the pompadoured, white-aproned sirens sing songs in his ear the praises of Irish stew and pork with applesauce. It's the opening of Roast Beef Medium, The Business Adventures of Emma McChesney, Book 1 by Edna Ferber. Can't wait to read more of her work. So, those are the books I brought into my library in the month of June. At least at this point, as I said, anything I purchase from here on out will be rolled into July. I'd love to hear what you think of these books, if you have recommendations based on my interest in any of them, and all that good stuff in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.